Mom, Dad, there's no way that I can express to you what I'm feeling right now. My heart is full to bursting, except to say, I'm the king of the world!
Hello and welcome back to Cameron, King of the World, and welcome to the day after Judgment Day. I felt like it was worth talking about Terminator Dark Fate in this series, considering Cameron was actually involved in the making of this film, the kind of initial idea of where this story would go for this new sixth installment in the Terminator franchise, and also he was involved in the post-production process. As far as the actual making of Terminator Dark Fate, Cameron very much stepped back and let director Tim Miller do his thing. But the problems and disagreements happened kind of before and after the film had been made, and so I think that there's a very interesting discussion to be made about whether or not you can really consider this film the third story in the Terminator series. So you look at the original film, The Terminator, this was Cameron's original idea, it was his baby, this was the film that was going to make him a director by making his own film. Something that was his idea, that he wasn't brought in to make this film, he wrote the script and made it himself. You know, that was kind of his gateway into Hollywood in a way, and it turned out to be a pretty damn good gateway movie where it was just this instant classic almost. And then he followed it up with Terminator 2 and wrote that film with William Wisher, and that was it. He was done with the Terminator films, and it really ended on a strong note. And in 1991, that was the end of the Terminator story. Skynet was kind of wiped from existence, and the road was open and clear ahead for the future. And of course, the rights kind of lapsed, and I don't know the full details behind this. I'm not even that interested, to be honest, which is why I didn't really look into it. But a sequel was made in 2003, over 10 years after Terminator 2, and this was directed by Jonathan Mostow and was called Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines. I think I mentioned it in a previous video where the only time I've really heard Cameron talking about Terminator 3 in specifics was when he was doing the commentary for Terminator 2. And it was the scene where Arnold says, I'll be back. And Cameron jokes to the writer of Terminator 2, William Wisher. He's like, I think that's better than she'll be back, which is a line that was in the trailers for Terminator 3. Now, I recently rewatched Terminator 3, kind of for this series, kind of just out of morbid curiosity. I've always liked it. I've always thought it was a good film. It just completely fell flat as a strong continuation of the first two films. And so rewatching it after definitely more than 10 years, I still really like it. I think it's a good film. I like where it takes the story. The ending is really powerful, especially the shot of Earth and just all the nuclear explosions going off and realizing that Judgment Day was going to happen no matter what. And what's really intriguing about Terminator Dark Fate is that it takes elements from all of those three, I don't call them unofficial sequels, but the three non-Cameron sequels. It takes elements from all three of those films, strong elements, I think, and merges them into this more cohesive third part of the story. Then we had Terminator Salvation, which I've only seen once, and I'm not too keen on revisiting. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was bad. It was just there, it was just there. And then we had Terminator Genisys in 2015. I think Terminator Salvation was 2011. Genisys came out in 2015. Now Arnold was back in the role, but they recast Sarah Connor and Michael Biehn with Jay Courtney and Emilia Clarke. And I went to see that film, Terminator Genisys, in the cinema, and it was the opening night, midnight premiere, and there was about 7 people. It was just an indicator of how successful this film was going to be. I was sat in that cinema going, wow, no one really cared about this, did they? And I was looking forward to it. The trailers gave away every twist and turn. But what really hooked me into Genisys was actually James Cameron. There was a promotional video released on YouTube of Cameron saying, I have no affiliation with this film. They've made it without me, but they showed me the film. I watched it and I loved it. I thought it was a great continuation. This is the true Terminator 3. They've really twisted the story on its head in a really interesting way, and I think this film's great. So I'm like, holy shit. I mean, I don't know why Cameron would do that for any other reason than he wanted to do it. He's not in any position where he needs to curry favor with the studio, and at that point in time he was working on the Avatar sequels and still is. So I don't really know why he made that decision to, unless he really did love Terminator Genesis. I don't hate it. I think it's a pretty good action movie. I still quote it on a regular basis. It's mainly the line where Arnold is playing this old kind of broken down Terminator and he's like reloading the bullets on these guns, and Sarah says to, I forget the lead into it, but I think she says that you're getting old, and his reply, his retort is old, not obsolete. So the line old, not obsolete is a line that gets frequently quoted between me and Connie. So it has that going for it. And there's some good stuff in there, but it's a little bit hokey and a little bit CGI plasticky with some of those things. I enjoyed revisiting the events of the first film, but really the recasting of Sarah Connor, which, I mean, I don't know how else you would have a young Sarah Connor really realistically without doing bad CGI, which wouldn't have held up anyway for a whole movie. So it was what it was. I like the commentary on kind of social media, and also just the amount of devices we all have in our homes, and how that plays into a more modern version of Skynet called Genesis. So I liked it. But they were definitely leading into more movies, and they had a trilogy planned, and it was all dates were made for like 2017 and 18, and it all fell through when the film didn't make much money. It made enough, but it didn't really make a huge profit, so that was dead in the water. So now they're looking for a different way to revitalize the franchise, and it's like, guys, read the history books. Like, this isn't a series that's going to be the next Star Wars. This isn't a series that's going to be the next Marvel Cinematic Universe. People love the Terminator films from way back when because they had real weight and content to them, and they had a special quality to them that Terminator 3 and Terminator Salvation and Terminator Genesis just simply did not have. No matter how good they were as action movies, and even if they did have good ideas, the full execution of them just wasn't there. So, I don't know the full particulars of all the dealings and everything like that, but it came to pass that Tim Miller, who just had huge success in 2016 with Deadpool, had exited the sequel, Deadpool 2, for whatever reason, and came in contact with a producer who was interested in bringing back the Terminator franchise and doing something different with it, and maybe just diverging from what they'd began with Terminator Genesis. And I do think the problem is when you start out with the idea of doing a trilogy, of doing a series of films, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because you're thinking you're thinking too far ahead. You need to just focus on making that one film. For all I know, that's what they did. They put all their time and energy into those films and stuff, and they thought, and we could make some sequels afterwards and make even more money. But I do think that there is a bit of short-sightedness, even though they're looking far beyond the boundary of just this one kind of reboot movie they're making. They're trying to revitalize the franchise, but they're also, I think, was it counting the eggs before they've hatched? I don't know what that phrase is. That's kind of what's going on there. And even with Terminator Dark Fate, the same thing happened. They were planning this as a trilogy, and they're like, yep, 2020, Cameron's going to work on the next two movies, and we're going to have Dark Fate 2 and Dark Fate 3. It's a new trilogy, a new start for the series, and this film ultimately came out, and it didn't make much of a splash, and didn't make a whole lot of money. So they're not doing a sequel to this film. Is there going to be another Terminator movie? Probably. Should there be? Probably not. It's just one of those things. But Tim Miller was contacted and kind of got talking with some people, and he was interested in doing this. But he wanted to bring Cameron on board, something that had never happened in the previous three sequels. James Cameron was kind of open to it. He came in and started working with Tim Miller on devising a story. And many writers were brought in. A lot of novelists were brought in by Tim Miller. And so ultimately the writing credits on this film are quite extensive. I don't know if it would say on the back if there's a can. There isn't a... But there was a lot of writers involved, including Cameron. He contributed ideas. I think it was Cameron's idea to have Arnold's character, the T-800, or Carl, be this Terminator who for like 20, 30 years had been kind of free of his mission and just living a normal life and developing some form of free will and some form of conscience. There's a really good line in the film where I think it might have been Grace, played by Mackenzie Davis, kind of asking Arnold, like, so you have a conscience or so you have free will? And he says the equivalent of one. Which is a key wording there. It's like, no, I'm not a human. I don't have a pure conscience or free will, but I have the equivalent of one. I've learned to kind of simulate one. And that's one of the best parts of the film, is Arnold's role in it, and that was a Cameron idea apparently. And Miller and Cameron, they disagreed on a lot of things about where to take it, but they were very much together on working on this film. And I remember when they announced it in 2017, there was I think, an hour-long discussion on stage with Cameron and Miller. And, Miller's like a big Terminator fan. He's like so excited and pumped to do this. And Cameron feels like this is the right guy to do it. Cameron said that we're treating the other movies as a bad dream or an alternate universe, which is permissible within our multiverse of the Terminator series and story. So Terminator Dark Fate went ahead. The big selling point was not just Arnold Schwarzenegger returning once again, but also the returning of Linda Hamilton, who hadn't been in the series really since Terminator 2. I think she lent her voice, or maybe just the likeness of her image and voice, to Salvation, I think, if I remember correctly. And I think maybe there's an image of her in Terminator 3, but Sarah Connor, as played by Linda Hamilton, of course we had the Sarah Connor Chronicles TV show. She hadn't returned to that role in, 30 years. It was a big deal. And I have to say, when this film was gearing up, I was getting really excited about it. And then the trailer dropped, and I had no interest. Terrible trailer for Dark Fate. I don't know what they were thinking. I forget the song now, but they used this song and they slowed it down. And it didn't have the Terminator theme. It was kind of like an artsy trailer, and it was showing us all this CGI stuff that just seemed, it was like trying to reinvent the wheel. We have Gabriel Luna playing the Rev 9 Terminator, the villain of the film, and it's I didn't really even think about this, even revisiting this for this video. It was only in looking up I thought, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense, because he splits into two Terminators, which just seems like really like a gimmick to me. But what it actually is, I never really thought about this, and I feel so stupid. He has this kind of matte black endoskeleton, which looks really cool, by the way. And on top of that, he has the kind of liquid metal, for the T-1000 for Terminator 2. So it's taking the T-1000 and the T-800 and putting them together so he can split into two bodies. One's the liquid metal, one is the kind of physical hard endoskeleton. I never really thought about that. I kind of felt like they were both liquid metal, and he just made himself the endoskeleton shape out of liquid metal, but that's not the case. So I do like the concept, and they didn't go overboard with it. But seeing it in the trailer just so brazenly and just showing all these big action scenes, and even in the build-up to it, Cameron's like, this is a white-knuckle ride. The action just keeps on coming. And it's like, these films aren't great because they're constantly filled with action. They're great because there's a deep story there as well that marries with the concept and the world building and the action and makes this great, complete experience. So I was really worried when this film came out, and I went to see it, and I fucking loved it. Oh my god, I loved this film. And revisiting it, I still love it. Now, the reason I'm including this in the series is because Cameron did work on it, but also I wanted to see if this would feel like a true Terminator 3. So when I revisited Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 for this series, a few days later I followed it up with Dark Fate. I didn't go to Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, I went to Dark Fate. How does this play as the third part of this story? And the answer is not quite as seamless as I had hoped. It doesn't really feel like a natural conclusion to, or natural continuation, I should say, of Terminator 2. It doesn't quite neatly slide into, whereas, the Terminator 1, Terminator 2, that they were made close enough that it feels very cohesive. You have the same cast, kind of, with, the guy, even the guy who played the psychiatrist. Is it the psychiatrist or the doctor in the police station in the first movie, and then he's in the mental institution in the second? There's a lot of connective threads beyond just Sarah Connor and Arnold, so they feel very connected. Dark Fate, there's this disconnect because of the time difference, but also it's just different. It really is just different, and you can't really avoid that, and you can't really delete in your mind those other Terminator films that Arnold appeared in. I think if Terminator 3 and if Genesis hadn't included Arnold Schwarzenegger, maybe it would have been easier to kind of be like, wow, this really feels like a true continuation. But he's done this role quite a few times now, and even with Linda Hamilton coming back, and she kicks ass. I mean, she trained for over a year for this movie, and Cameron actually convinced her to do it, and they used to be, a married couple, and he sent her a very long, rambling email about wanting her back for this film and how important it would be, and also, there's the controversial plot device of killing off John Connor in the beginning of the movie and having Edward Furlong provide his likeness to a CGI young John Connor. And that CGI is, it's a mixed bag. There's one shot of Sarah that just looks bang on like 1991 Terminator 2 Sarah Connor, Linda Hamilton, and it's just like, wow. Then she starts moving and it's not quite as convincing, and apparently they cut out some of that scene, which was even less convincing, but you take the Terminator and he blows away this child at the beginning of the film, and it really flips things on its head. And this was a Cameron suggestion. He felt that enough had been done with John Connor. And I remember when Genesis came out, he was like, oh, this is really cool, making John Connor the villain. But, it didn't really pan out, And so Cameron's like, look, this needs to be more about Sarah and her trauma and her life. And that makes sense, but also this new generation as well. And I think they handle that really well. We have Grace, who's like half human, half machine, which is kind of taking from the Sam Worthington character from Terminator Salvation. We have the concept that it's not Skynet, but it's Legion, which is another version of Skynet. And that's something that I think kind of is taken from where Terminator 3 goes, which is that no matter what happened in the second movie, they stopped Skynet, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen no matter what, because humanity will not stop meddling with things that they shouldn't meddle with, and artificial intelligence is going to just destroy us at some point. That's the story of Terminator 3. I think is that it's inevitable that we're going to destroy each other, which kind of links in nicely with Terminator 2, where John is saying we're not going to make it, are we? Humans, I mean, and Arnold's like, no, it's in your nature to destroy yourselves. So it fits well, and that is kind of brought into Terminator Dark Fate as well. And also with Genesis, we had an older Terminator who's aged because he is actually living tissue over the metal endoskeleton. So we see an older T-800, but this isn't the T-800 from Terminator 2. This is the one who killed John Connor as a child at the beginning of Terminator Dark Fate. So it's a really interesting and explosive reunion of Sarah and this who now names himself Carl. And we see that he now is helping this family who went through a rough spot, and he feels like he has a son and a wife, but he also feels this sense of responsibility, and he's finding out these temporal rifts. He's realizing that there are certain points in time that are going to open up and Terminators are going to come back, and so he sends Sarah the coordinates so that she has a purpose for her life. It's a way of him repaying. Not even repaying, because there's nothing to pay back, but he's trying to make amends and also give her a purpose in life after he took her purpose from her, because he realizes once his mission shut down, what he'd done, as he begins to develop, again, the equivalent of a conscience. I think it's brilliant storytelling, but also Grace, as I said, played by Mackenzie Davis. She's this half human, half machine, augmented human, kind of a super soldier. And she's been sent back from the future. It's a Terminator movie. You need to send people back from the future, I guess. And she's there to protect Danny Ramos, played by Natalia Reyes, who is this Mexican woman who is, much like Sarah Connor, this seemingly, just normal, ordinary person who becomes this leader of a resistance. And they flip it on its head where, Sarah Connor meets this young girl called Danny, and it's like, oh, so you're let me guess, you're the next me. Like, you're going to give birth to the leader of the resistance. And later on, they're like, no, she is the leader of the resistance. It's not about her unborn child. This isn't the same story. She is the one who leads this resistance in the future where Legion is involved. And so, that's where, there's a little bit of a twist in it, which is nice. It takes it in places you think that's going to be a retread, and it gives it enough of a kick where it feels a little bit different and a bit more interesting, I think. And overall, I really like the film. I appreciate it also that while they're using these nostalgia plays where Sarah Connor turns up and she's like, I'll be back, they don't lean into it fully. Like, Arnold never says it. In fact, there's a really poignant moment where he is leaving his family, who he's kind of been with for a very long time, to go and help, Sarah and Danny and Grace to kind of fight this Rev 9 Terminator. And he says that he's spoken to his family and they know that he's not going to be, coming back. And he just says very simply, I won't be back. And it's really nicely delivered. I think Arnold does a really great job. And I think it becomes kind of metatextual in a way, because you feel emotionally attached to Arnold in this film, not really because of the character of Carl, but because of the accumulative work that he's done in the entire series as an actor in the multiple versions of the T-800 character that he's portrayed across 1, 2, 3, and Terminator Genesis, and you feel an attachment to the actor, and that translates over to the character, I think, because when he does die at the end and they finally use that Terminator theme, it's a really powerful moment, I think, and it's just it's really cool. And again, I like how they didn't lean into the score of using the da-dun, dun, da-dun. They should have used it in the trailer. I honestly think they would have made another $100 million if they'd put that fucking da-dun-dun-dun in the trailers. They didn't really use it. Maybe they did a little bit, but it was more of this, they're trying to be fucking clever with it, and it just didn't work. The trailers were shit. They really were poorly handled, I think. They could have done a much better job with the trailers and promoting the film in a lot of ways. I mean, they did well with hyping up Sarah Connor and everything, but it just didn't. I don't know. I feel like they could have really leaned into that. That's a way to lean into it in the promotion. In the movie, they don't really go straight into the Terminator theme, and it's held until the best possible moment. But that final fight scene at the end, in that kind of in the dam, it's brilliant. There's just so much tension, and there's some great action set pieces in the film. It gets a little bit too CGI heavy at times, but it's a great action film. It really is. And I think the three female leads in the film, Danny, Grace, and Sarah, they just complement each other. I love the story between Grace and Danny, and I think Natalia Reyes does a pretty damn good job of selling a character that's really hard to sell. And again, Linda Hamilton knows all about this. I mean, she gets kind of her life ripped away from her. The people that she loves are killed and just taken from her, but she has to keep moving forward, and the film's not going to be very interesting if Danny is an emotional wreck throughout the whole thing. She needs that strength, which is obviously there and is inside her from the beginning, because otherwise she wouldn't be the leader of this resistance in the future. So even like the opening shot of the film, which is kind of cool, which is like a skull and kind of like, I'm not sure if the skull is just on a beach, and the waves are coming in, and the skull gets more revealed through the sand. Really nice touch. But then the Terminators come up, and it's just like the way the endoskeletons rise out of the water is very weightless. I don't feel like I'm seeing an actual object rising out of the water. So I remember when I saw this in the cinema, I was like, I was really worried at the beginning. But for the most part, the visual effects look pretty damn good. There's just these bits where it just feels like they maybe went a bit overboard at times. And, in general, I think, and watching the behind the scenes, you actually see how much they did for real, which was really appreciated. For me, I think that they did a really good job of marrying practical effects with digital effects. But there's even things in the film that I would assume was digital that they really did for real. They crashed cars, and they did a lot of big action stuff, and I think it makes me think of the original two films, where there's just this tangible quality to the action set pieces, which you don't fully get in this film. You just don't, because there's just too much CGI going on there. But you get almost some of that tangible quality to some of the action, which is good. But the character work is great too, and there's just lots of memorable moments in this. It doesn't fully feel like a Terminator 3. I like the conclusion of the film. I would love to see a Sarah and Danny Ramos kind of story. That would be great for me. But just leave it. You've done a good job. A third film in the chronology of the story has finally been made, which is a pretty damn good film. It still isn't anywhere near the quality of the first two movies, but it's not. It's within punching distance. It's within a very long punching distance. If your arms are like 20 foot long, it's within punching distance of the first two movies. But it is what it is. I enjoyed it, but again, I enjoyed it as a Terminator 3, but as a standalone experience, I love this film. But watching 1, 2, and then Dark Fate, it doesn't quite blend as well as I would like it to, I suppose, and it still has the weight of I don't call them failed sequels, but the weight of the failed experiments that were these movies that were made in the hopes that they would launch new trilogies and new sections of the franchise, which at least Salvation and Genesis and Dark Fate were, and neither of them were successful in that. And I really liked there's a quote from Mackenzie Davis, who plays Grace, where she was asked in 2020, a year after the film came out, do you see yourself returning to the role if a sequel is made? And she said that she loved making the film. She's really proud of the film that they made, but she doesn't see why they would make a film, because it didn't make enough money. And if it didn't make enough money, the people don't want to see it. And why would you make something that the audience does not want to see? And she's just summed it up right there, I think. The general mass audience, they aren't keen on it. They don't want to see more. They'll go and watch it, for a Saturday night, date or whatever. But I don't think this is a film that a fandom is ready to be born out of. Not that there isn't a fandom for the Terminator films, but I don't think you're going to spark a new generation of fans for this. And it's not going to be a cinematic universe. It's not going to be a new trilogy. And so I think with Terminator, in general, they should kind of, cut their losses and just accept this as a nice kind of conclusion to the story. But I have no doubt that at some point in the future, another Terminator film will be made. And, even Cameron was talking about it. He was saying that he might bring Arnold back, and, he feels like Arnold is integral to the franchise, and he actually really wanted Arnold to be back for Terminator Dark Fate. And when Cameron was talking about a sequel to Dark Fate, he's saying that, we can bring Arnold back. I mean, it doesn't matter that he died in the last one. I'm a writer, I can figure it out. But I think that you just need to let it go. You need to let it die. There is no fate but what we make, and I think that the fate of the Terminator franchise, really should see a road in which there are no more movies or sequels down the line. I think that it's been wrung dry well enough at this point, but it was really surprising and enjoyable to have this third kind of movie in a way, or the sixth overall, that really felt like a nice return to form. Like it's acceptable on the level of 1 and 2, But I just think it's really, Linda Hamilton was really good in the film. She really brought a new dimension to that character. And there's a great scene when she's just sat on this log, and I think it's Danny who comes up to her, and she just says, I don't even have a picture of him. Like, I'm starting to forget his face, because her son was murdered, slaughtered in front of her. It's a horrific thing, and you really feel the weight of that because of her performance. And I think that carries the film through to the point where you really care about her character. And I also cared about Grace and Danny, and I think that Arnold really brought it with Carl as well, and it just felt like a different way to take it. We've seen Arnold be the bad Terminator, we've seen him be the good Terminator, and now we just see him as this kind of impartial kind of, I know what I did was wrong. I now have the equivalent of a conscience, and I'm going to try and help you because I think it's the right thing to do. At least that's what my programming is simulating in my head, is telling me is the right thing to do. And so the morality of it is not quite black and white. And so, yeah. And I actually think that Gabriel Luna does a really good job as the Rev 9. In trailers, he just looked really bland, but he very much in the same vein as Robert Patrick. He felt like a really intimidating kind of panther-like presence, and he had a little bit of a charm to him as well, especially in the prison sequence when he's kind of checking in. He's like, my whole body's a weapon, So he had that kind of little extra touch of personality that wasn't maybe quite there with the T-1000, which isn't a criticism, but he gives it just a little bit of a kick of something different, which is appreciated, I think, in a villain character. But there isn't much of it. He's pretty much just this stone cold, on a mission Terminator, as they should be. But yeah, so that's it. That's my thoughts on Dark Fate. I think it's a really good action film, and I really enjoy it as a Terminator movie. But as a true Terminator 3, I guess so. But honestly, if hand on my heart, I think in the future, it's going to be T1, it's going to be T2, and that's kind of the end of my Terminator revisit. That's going to, and then 3 and Genesis and Salvation, they'll be there to revisit maybe once every 10, 15 years. It's kind of like an oddity just to see again. And then Dark Fate will be, have more of a regular rotation in my revisiting, but it won't be like, okay, let's watch the trilogy. Let's watch Terminator 1, Terminator 2, and Dark Fate. I hoped it would feel like that, and maybe with time we'll get there, but for now at least, it doesn't really truly feel like the Terminator 3 that I hoped that it would, but I still love it all the same. And at the end of the film, after it was, during the post-production of the film, I should say, Tim Miller and James Cameron started to butt heads again. I mean, they disagreed kind of respectfully in what should be done in the pre-production of this film. Cameron stepped back, Tim Miller went in, made the movie, and in the edit, Cameron was very hands-on, looked at the first cut of the film, made changes and suggested changes as well, and him and Tim Miller just didn't really seem to be on the same wavelength, and Tim Miller has said that there were lines of dialogue he found very poetic and meaningful in the film that Cameron said, you don't need him, unimportant. And so Tim Miller has said that he will never work with James Cameron again, which is an interesting point. And that was really the genesis of, no pun intended, of me making this video to begin with. It was like, wow, this is a really interesting point in Cameron's career where he's now kind of coming in to work on films that he's not directing. And now you have a situation where his reputation for being difficult to work with has now resulted in, this video that I saw years ago of them together saying, we're going to work together, we're going to make this trilogy, it's going to be a new trilogy of Terminator films. And then they make the first one, and then Tim Miller's like, I'm never working with him again, respectfully. Apparently it's an amicable separation creatively, but they didn't quite feel like they were on the same page with this in a lot of ways. And so that's interesting overall. And I'm surprised, honestly, that this film turned out as good as it did, with the fact that it has so many writers. because that usually is a death knell for a film, is to have so many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. But I think it does work really well. There's maybe a few things I could niggle at here and there, but I'm not going to get into them. But overall, I do love the film, and there's a lot in there that I really, really enjoy. But as a James Cameron kind of production, it certainly was more of a kind of push and pull between Tim Miller and James Cameron and the other writers as well, I'm assuming. But I would probably guess that it was mainly Tim Miller and James Cameron duking it out for what gets into the final cut of this film. And ultimately, at the end, it was a situation where Tim Miller was not keen to return, and I don't think the audience was that keen to see a sequel either. Me, I would have loved to have seen a Sarah Connor, Danny Ramos film. That would have been really fun. But I don't need it either. Would I pay to go see it? Yes. Do I feel like my life would be, or my movie-going life, I should say, would be incomplete without it? No. I think we're fine with just this one, I think. But only time will tell, as this is just a franchise that just seems to never die, like a Terminator and like Skynet. It just keeps coming back. But it does seem to be something that is definitely giving out, there's diminishing returns with this franchise. And I think that to strike lucky, in my opinion, with Dark Fate, just count your blessings, pull the cord, get out of there, we're done. Terminator finished. But again, we will see what happens in the future. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.